If you invest in a CD player, it's a relatively plug-and-play device. Plug in the power socket, 2 RCAs into your amp, start enjoying music. If you invest in a turntable, it has to have a certain amount of setup for it to sound its best and for you to get the most out of your investment. A lot of people find some of this sort of thing intimidating. Today, we're going to demystify it. Hi, I'm Joe with Gramophone, and I'm so excited to be here today with my friend Robert Bruce with Pro-Ject. Robert?
Hi.
How you feeling?
I'm great.
Good.
Ready to do a full setup here.
Good. So we have taken this Pro-Ject Perspex 6 turntable and essentially disassembled some of the parts so that you can really watch Robert. And I've worked with you enough to know that you're both an expert at doing all this and you're not so obsessive compulsive that you turn it into rocket science. But you're going to be able to see each of the parts of turntable setup done correctly on this one. And we're hoping that whatever turntable you have, you're going to be able to get some benefit out of it and perhaps get more performance out of your turntable than what you've been experiencing previously.
You bet.
So, Robert, let's get after it.
Okay.
So, Robert, let's just talk about some of those things that are common to all the different turntables that are out there.
You bet. The primary things, first of all, we start with a plinth or a base. Every turntable has a base of some sort. In this case, this is the 6 Perspex SB, and this is an acrylic plinth or base. Other elements common to all turntables, you have to have a motor of some sort to drive the platter. Here we have an AC synchronous motor that's driven by a DC to AC generator, so it doesn't rely on AC from the wall. We generate our own AC signal to make sure the motor's always operating at perfect speed. In this case, this is a sub-platter design. So this is a Corian material, and this is isolated from the base. So the platter and the arm are isolated from the plinth and the feet and the base and the platform this turntable sits on. But the common elements, again, in all turntables would be you've got some sort of a bearing that the platter sits on, and we'll put the platter on in this in just a moment. You've got a tone arm. You have the motor and power supply I just mentioned. You have output from the turntable to feed into a phono preamp or into your receiver or preamp or integrated amp. And those elements improve as you go up in performance and price, the engineering tolerances, the quality of materials used, and the benefit is more information from the record as you get better materials. So we're looking at a turntable which is about $3,000, $2,800, and a fantastic value because it has some elements that are really unique in this price range. So the acrylic plinth I've already mentioned, which is unique, and then we have adjustable cone feet to get this level and stable. So I've leveled the plinth. We'll level the platter once we put the platter on. I'd like to point out a couple things that are really interesting here. One of which is the bearing of most turntables is a stainless steel polished material, and there's usually either a steel or a Teflon thrust plate. In this case, this little white thing is a ceramic ball. So we have a ceramic bearing, and this is inverted. A typical bearing would have a bearing well set into the turntable, and then the platter would have a bearing or a sub-platter that would go in. This one being inverted, the shaft extends out of the base of the turntable, and then we have a bearing well here, and this also has ceramic on the top of the bearing well. The ceramic is a very hard material, and it's also very quiet. So this is a superior bearing design to what we would normally find in most turntables. There are other turntables with a ceramic bearing. They tend to be very expensive. I'm going to start the assembly. We'll just do a couple little things here. Put the belt on the motor. And this motor, as I mentioned, is isolated from the platter and the arm. Those are the most critical parts in terms of picking up any noise or vibration, mechanical energy. So the motor sits on the plinth, but the platter and arm are isolated. This is a carbon fiber arm tube. This tone arm is known as the Pro-Ject Evo 9cc. It's a carbon fiber one-piece arm tube from the bearing assembly all the way up to the end of the head shell. Really strong, yet it's very lightweight, works with a wide variety of phono cartridges. And for that reason, this turntable includes a multitude of counterweights. So we've got different sizes, different weights. It actually includes 4 different ones, so that regardless of the cartridge you choose, you've got a weight that will perfectly work with the requirements of the specific phono cartridge.
Because different phono cartridges will have a different weight, and you want to counter that weight. It's very clever that you guys have included 4 of these, not 1. If you don't mind, I want to just point out quickly a couple of the things that make a better turntable better. This part about isolating, having the motor back here so that it's not right underneath. It's not feeding into the record its own vibrations.
Right.
That in itself versus, let's say a $399 turntable is going to make a big difference in terms of you being able to clearly hear the musical notes. And the second thing is when you talk about this being a sub-platter, again, in a modestly priced turntable, that's all going to be integrated as one thing. So now the phono cartridge is having to deal not only with all the vibrations going on and trying to stay in the groove, but the process of playing the record itself is getting the phono cartridge all to where it doesn't want to be. And when you listen to a system with a really good turntable in it, it sounds fantastic, but it's because of these specific elements that, are engineered better because the engineers have the ability to do so, knowing that the turntable is going to sell at a higher price.
And Pro-Ject, the engineering team in Austria, has the advantage of making so many turntables from so many different price ranges, and many of the elements of the higher end products find their way into more affordable models. The debut Evo 2 is a brand new model that's just coming out, and it's $699 and incorporates some really cool things. Again, a carbon fiber arm tube and a really good arm bearing, very good platter and bearing, very good motor and power supply. So the critical elements to get really good sound from a record at $699 is really, really cool.
And here at Gramophone, we just completed a video on Evo 2 and talking about the upgrades versus the previous Evo. We'll reference that, put a link in the description for everybody to see.
Nice.
Got a few other things here that are kind of nice.
Yeah, this is a clamp, and this is used to clamp the record down onto the platter. We'll demonstrate that after the setup is done. This platter is unique in that this is an MDF material for the base of the platter, and then the top is actually vinyl. Vinyl has obviously the same exact characteristics as a record because that's what this is. And so when we put the record on and put this clamp on, we don't need a mat, and the record sits safely on and couples to the platter. So really good combination of materials used. Also, the resonant properties of the MDF and the vinyl help to offset each other to make this platter quieter. So again, everything we can do to lower noise and improve the performance. So
there's one other thing I'd love to talk about, Robert, and then I think we'll just let you go ahead and do a full turntable setup. But Pro-Ject, as you mentioned, makes turntables in all different kinds of price ranges. That's one of the things we love about selling Pro-Ject here at Gramophone is no matter where you're at budget-wise, you can find a Pro-Ject that's the right one for you. But I think one of the things that is really important to point out is that with most turntables, you can't upgrade the performance over time, but you guys have a balanced option.
we do, and that's one of the things we'll look at when we complete the setup of this.
Great.
We're putting a moving coil cartridge on here. Moving coil cartridges are inherently a balance signal generator. So we're going to be able to connect this cartridge to a phono preamp that's balanced. This is a little mini XLR connector, 5 pins, balance connector. We're converting 2 RCAs and a ground into the balance connector that's on the back of this turntable right now. Moving magnet cartridges cannot be wired balanced. We have one exception. Pro-Ject just brought out the Picket Pro B, which is the first moving magnet cartridge that's capable of being wired balanced. Typically, moving coils are the only balanced source for a phono cartridge. The difference when connecting the phono cartridge to the phono preamp balanced is dramatic. About a 10 dB lower noise floor. One of the things people talk about that they don't think turntables are as good as high-res streaming. Dynamic range, too noisy, turntables are scratchy and such. And they can be, but a record that's in decent shape, especially in a configuration like this where we have a moving coil cartridge wired balanced, is dynamic and clean and sounds fantastic. So that's what we're ultimately doing here, is getting this set up to be a fully balanced phono system. So yeah, let's get into the setup.
This one is called?
That's an anti-skate.
Yes.
We'll talk about it a little bit as we go
Great.
through all of the different steps of the setup. So
Great.
I'm going to start with mounting the cartridge. So we have little tiny cartridge leads here, or tags they're referred to. And we've got a red, a white, a blue, and a green. Those correlate to each of the different channels of the signal. So I'm going to find the green one if I can. Can't tell. Oh, that was it. This you want to do with the stylus guard on, because it's very easy to lose track and slip and using my little needle nose pliers to make sure I get these guys all fully seated. Great. Now I'm going to get a general setup, knowing where this cartridge normally approximately sits. And then we're going to bring out some tools. So the first tool I'm going to use is a Pro-Ject Align It Pro. There are similar tools to this that other manufacturers make as well. This one is a fantastic one, especially for Pro-Ject turntables. The bearing on this turntable has a very nice indent and allows us to precisely set the pivot point of where the arm bearing and the arm pivot point is. And then I'm going to look at alignment of the overhang and angle. Yeah, we need to go a little further. On this grid, there is a point where the stylus tip should go right in. And then there's a grid to get the alignment correct. What we want to end up with is the stylus tip in the exact position it should be in, which will give us the least amount of error tracking across the entire record. So this needs to come out. This is something that requires a little care. Now, in many of the Pro-Ject turntables, the Debut Evo 2 we mentioned earlier, the cartridge is already pre-aligned and pre-installed. So that saves some time and some angst about, is everything perfect? But in this case, setting up a new cartridge, we're going to do this alignment. And it takes a little bit of time, but the results are worth it when you get everything right. Okay. And I don't know if you can get tight enough in to see that, but we've got the stylus tip on the point and we've got the cartridge body aligned. Then I'm going to take one little look at this, the azimuth. So I'm going to move this out of the way and bring the little mirror. I'm going to set that down and take a close look from the front. And the azimuth is looking at the cartridge from the front. We do not want it to be leaning to one side or the other. We want the cartridge body to be perfectly parallel to the record surface so that the stylus tip in the record groove is perfectly perpendicular. And so if that's off, we have a little set screw here that we can loosen, and then we could adjust that. This is set but from the factory, but occasionally either the cartridge itself or the tone arm, if it's been used a lot, may get out of adjustment. In this case, we're right on, so we don't need to make any adjustment to the azimuth.
Thank you for watching this video. We really appreciate your support. Just click the link below to see part 2.